The evening sun was dipping behind the roofs of Elmswood when the laughter began. The golden light streamed through the big glass windows of the Fernandez mansion, making everything inside shine. The polished piano, the silver trays, even the tall glasses filled with orange punch. Every Sunday, the mansion turned into a small concert hall. Guests arrived in fine clothes, their perfume filling the air, their voices echoing through the hall. And in the center of it all sat Daniel Fernandez, the proud son of the house and the evening's performer. Ravi stood quietly by the door holding a tray. His mother, Mira, was busy in the kitchen with the other helpers, and he had come to assist her. But each time the piano began to play, his eyes would wander toward the music room. He couldn't help it. The sound drew him like a magnet. He had never touched a piano in his life, but the notes fascinated him. Each sound seemed to tell a story, sometimes happy, sometimes sad. He didn't understand the language of music, but it spoke to something deep inside him. "Don't just stand there, boy," one of the waiters whispered, snapping him back to reality. "Go serve these to the guests." Ravi nodded quickly, taking the tray. He walked carefully across the hall, his eyes still drawn to the piano. Daniel played confidently, his fingers flying over the keys while the guests clapped and smiled. He was used to the attention. He liked being the center of it. When the music stopped, everyone gathered around him with compliments. "You've really improved, Daniel. Your father must be so proud." "What a talent." Daniel accepted the praise with an easy smile. He was tall, well-dressed, and sure of himself, everything Ravi was not. Ravi tried not to stare, but Daniel noticed him. "Hey," Daniel said, turning toward him. "What are you staring at, boy? Haven't you seen a piano before?" A few guests chuckled. Ravi froze for a moment, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, sir," he said softly. "I didn't mean to stare. I was just listening. It sounds beautiful." Daniel laughed, not in a cruel way at first, but in amusement. "Beautiful, huh? Do you even know what I'm playing?" Ravi shook his head. "No, sir, but I can feel it. It sounds like something alive." Now a few more guests turned to look. One woman smiled slightly. "That's quite a thing to say for a servant boy," she said. Ravi tried to move away, but Daniel wasn't done. "Tell me, what does your father do?" "My father passed away when I was small," Ravi said quietly. "My mother works here. She cleans and cooks." "Oh, right," Daniel said. "You're the maid's son." He looked at the others, grinning. "Maybe he wants to learn the piano too." Laughter rippled through the room. Ravi felt the heat rise to his face. I would like to someday," he said before he could stop himself. That made them laugh even harder. "You, a pianist?" one man said between laughs. "You can't even afford shoes, boy." Even Daniel chuckled. "Playing the piano isn't like washing dishes. It takes years of training, lessons, money, all things you don't have." Ravi didn't reply. His throat felt dry. He looked down at the tray in his hands, focusing on the glasses to stop himself from crying. But Mira, who had come out from the kitchen with a tray of snacks, saw everything. She noticed the redness in her son's eyes, the small tremor in his lips. Her heart tightened, but she said nothing there. Not in front of them. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the music had faded into silence, Ravi sat alone outside near the servant quarters. The night was quiet except for the chirping of crickets. The moonlight lay softly across the yard. He sat on a broken wooden bench looking toward the mansion windows that still glowed faintly. Inside, he could still see the piano, big, shining, untouched for now. He didn't hate Daniel. He didn't even hate the people who laughed. He just couldn't understand why his dream seemed funny to them. Was it wrong to wish for something beautiful just because he was poor? Mira came out slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "Ravi," she called softly. "It's late. Come inside, son." He didn't move. "Ma," he said quietly. "Why did they laugh at me?" Mira sat down beside him. "People laugh at what they don't understand, Beta," she said gently. "They think dreams belong only to rich people. But that's not true." He turned to her. "Do you think I can learn the piano?" She looked at him for a long moment. She had seen that same look in his father's eyes years ago. A quiet strength, a spark of something unshakable. "If you want it badly enough, you can," she said. "But it won't be easy." Ravi nodded slowly. "I don't care if it's hard, I just want to try," she smiled faintly. "Then try, my son. But remember, don't let pride or anger drive you. Let love do it. Love for the music, not revenge on those who laughed." That night, Ravi couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the sound of the piano in his head, the keys, the rhythm, the melody. He could almost feel it under his fingers. He imagined himself playing one day not for applause, but for the peace it brought him. The next morning, after helping his mother with chores, he went around the mansion looking for old things that were thrown away. Behind the storage room, he found a broken, dust-covered keyboard. 2 keys were missing and the rest barely made a sound. But it was something. His heart lifted as if he had found treasure. He cleaned it carefully and took it to the servants' quarters. When his mother saw it, she laughed softly. "That old thing? It hasn't worked for years. I'll fix it," he said, somehow, and he did. Using tape, bits of cardboard, and sheer patience, he made it playable enough to produce faint sounds. It wasn't much, but it was enough to begin. Every night after finishing his work, Ravi would sit beside the broken keyboard. He didn't have lessons or notes, so he listened through the walls, through the windows, whenever Daniel practiced. He tried to copy what he heard, pressing the same pattern on his little keyboard. Sometimes the sound was off, sometimes it matched, but each night he improved just a little. Mira would often peek from the doorway, smiling to herself. She never stopped him, even when it meant he slept fewer hours. His eyes would shine with quiet joy each time a note sounded right. Weeks passed like that. The laughter of that night still echoed in his mind, but it no longer hurt him. It fueled him. It whispered, "Prove them wrong, but with grace." Sometimes, when Daniel played loudly during his practice, Ravi would pause his own playing to listen carefully. He didn't just hear music anymore, he began to understand it. He could tell when the melody rose with joy or fell with sadness. He learned how a pause could speak as loudly as a note. One evening, Daniel's mother hosted another gathering. Ravi was again serving drinks when one of the guests, a kind-looking old man with silver hair, stopped him. "You look familiar," the man said. "Weren't you here the last time Daniel played?" Ravi nodded politely. "You were listening quite carefully," the man added with a smile. "Do you play too?" Ravi hesitated. "Not really, I just try sometimes," the man's eyes twinkled. "Ah, that's how it starts. Keep trying." Daniel overheard them and smirked. "Careful, Mr. Hale," he said. "You'll encourage him. Soon he'll ask to play at the next party." There was laughter again, but it didn't sting this time. Ravi smiled politely and walked away. Inside, he made a silent promise: "One day I will play. Not here, not to impress anyone, but for myself." When the party ended and the guests left, Ravi sneaked into the music room. The lights were off and the air smelled faintly of polish and perfume. The grand piano stood quietly, gleaming in the moonlight from the window. He approached it slowly, as if afraid to wake something sacred. His fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. Then softly he pressed one note. A pure sound filled the room, deep and rich, nothing like his broken keyboard. He pressed another, then another. The sound wrapped around him like a dream. He smiled without realizing it. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. Suddenly he heard a voice behind him. "What are you doing here?" It was Daniel. Ravi turned quickly, heart pounding. "I'm sorry, sir," he stammered. "I didn't mean..." Daniel looked annoyed at first, then curious. "You're not supposed to touch this." "But it..." He paused. "Go on, play something." Ravi froze. "I don't really know how," he admitted. "Then why are you here?" Daniel said sharply. Ravi looked down. "Because I want to learn. I just wanted to feel what it's like." Daniel studied him for a moment, then shrugged. "Dreams are cheap," he said coldly. "Go help your mother." Ravi left quietly. But as he stepped outside, he didn't feel defeated. He felt something stronger, a decision settling inside him. If no one would teach him, he would still learn. If they laughed, he would let them. One day he would play the piano, not because he wanted to prove them wrong, but because he could. That night, as he lay awake listening to the wind outside, he imagined his hands moving across shining keys, music flowing like water, and faces turning not in laughter, but in awe. He didn't know when or how that day would come, but he knew it would. And for the first time, the dream didn't feel distant anymore. It felt alive. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but Ravi didn't forget the promise he made to himself that night. Every morning, he helped his mother with chores before leaving for his part-time work at the market. Every evening, after everyone in the mansion was asleep, he returned to the old servants' quarters where his broken keyboard waited. That little piece of junk had become his world. The first few weeks were hard. The keys stuck, the sounds came out flat, and his fingers cramped quickly. Still, he kept pressing on. Some nights he grew frustrated, hitting the keys too hard only to realize that anger made the sound worse. Then he'd stop, take a deep breath, and start again. Slower this time, softer. He had no teacher, no books, not even a proper instrument. All he had was his ear and his will. Whenever Daniel practiced in the big hall, Ravi would stop what he was doing and listen carefully. He stood outside the window sometimes, hidden behind the tall plants, memorizing the melody one note at a time. He didn't know the names of the notes, but he remembered the sounds: high, low, short, long. He would hum them softly while sweeping the yard or washing dishes. Then later that night, he would sit at his keyboard and try to replay what he remembered. At first, everything sounded wrong. The tune broke apart halfway, the rhythm didn't fit. But little by little, he began to improve. His hands started moving more confidently. His ears learned to tell the difference between right and wrong sounds. Mira watched him from the doorway every night, her eyes filled with quiet pride and worry. She wanted to tell him to rest, but she couldn't bring herself to stop him. The way his face lit up each time a melody came out right reminded her of his father, a man who had also dreamed big despite having little. One night, while Mira was cleaning the dining room, she overheard Daniel talking to one of his friends. "My father's bringing a piano teacher from the city," he said proudly. "She's going to train me for the state competition." The friend whistled. "Lucky you." "That's expensive training," Daniel laughed. "Of course. My father says no expense should be spared for talent." Mira paused for a moment, her cloth frozen in midair. She thought about her son, practicing on that broken thing in the servants' quarters, teaching himself in silence. No one spared any expense for him, yet he didn't stop. She smiled sadly and continued cleaning. When she told Ravi about the new teacher, his eyes lit up. "A teacher from the city?" he whispered. "Then I can listen and learn even more." "Just be careful," Mira warned. "Don't get caught standing outside again." "I won't, Ma," he said, grinning. The next day, the teacher arrived, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. D'Souza. She was kind-faced but strict. Her voice carried across the halls as she corrected Daniel's playing. "Not like that, Daniel. Softer here. Feel the rhythm." Ravi listened from outside the back window where the curtains were slightly open. He could hear every word she said, every note Daniel played, every correction she made. He didn't just listen to the sound this time. He listened to how she taught, how she explained music. When Daniel took a break, Ravi ran to his keyboard and practiced the same exercises she had mentioned: finger stretches, timing drills, and small note combinations. He didn't understand the words, but his heart understood the feeling. After several weeks, his playing began to sound smoother. He even made his own small melodies, simple but full of heart. When Mira heard them, she sometimes closed her eyes and smiled. "It sounds like a song from home," she said softly. Encouraged, Ravi began to wake up earlier each morning just to practice before his work. He used to be tired all the time, but now the music filled him with energy. Even when the days were long and his hands rough from labor, he found comfort in those few stolen hours with his music. One evening, something unexpected happened. Daniel's new sheet music fell out of the trash near the back door. Someone had torn it slightly and thrown it away. Ravi picked it up carefully and smoothed the wrinkles. The pages were filled with strange symbols and lines, but each one fascinated him. He didn't understand how to read them, but he traced the shapes with his finger, wondering what secrets they held. Over time, he collected more such discarded sheets. Whenever Daniel made a mistake and crumpled a page, Ravi would find it later, smooth it out, and keep it. Slowly, he began to notice patterns: how notes on higher lines sounded higher when played, how lower ones produced deeper tones. He was learning a language without ever being taught. One night, while practicing, he noticed his mother standing near the door holding a small oil lamp. "What are you doing, Ma?" he asked, smiling. "I was thinking," she said softly. "Maybe I can ask the old caretaker if he still has that tiny radio that used to play songs. It's broken, but maybe we can fix it. You could listen to music when Daniel's not practicing." Ravi's eyes widened. "Really?" Mira nodded. "I'll ask him tomorrow." True to her word, she brought the radio the next evening. It barely worked. The sound was scratchy and faded, But sometimes when the signal was clear, it played short bits of classical tunes. Ravi sat close, turning the knob gently, catching each moment of music before it vanished into static. Those small pieces became his lessons. He copied them endlessly, adjusting his fingers, feeling the rhythm. Sometimes he even imagined an invisible teacher guiding his hands. Months went by. Seasons changed. The trees outside the mansion lost their leaves, then grew them again. And with each passing day, Ravi's skill grew stronger. He had no audience, no applause, no fancy room, only his mother's quiet smile and his own heartbeat keeping time. One afternoon, while Mira was polishing the silver trays, the mansion's driver walked in holding a newspaper. "Did you hear?" he said. "Master Daniel is going to play in front of the mayor next month." "That's wonderful," Mira said politely. Ravi overheard from the corner. His heart tightened a little, not out of jealousy but longing. How he wished he could be part of something like that, just once. That night he practiced longer than usual. His fingers ached, but he didn't stop. When the moon climbed high, he whispered to himself, "One day I'll be ready too." But fate has its own way of helping those who try. One morning, while cleaning the hall, Ravi noticed something odd. The grand piano's lid was slightly open, and a few keys were marked with tiny stickers, notes Daniel used to remember during his practice. The teacher had forgotten to close the lid after the last session. Ravi looked around. The room was empty. His heart began to pound. Should he, just once? He stepped closer, barely breathing. He placed his fingers on the cool white keys and pressed gently. A soft note filled the air, rich and beautiful like honey flowing through his veins. He froze, afraid someone might hear. But no one came. He pressed another key, then another, playing the melody he had been practicing for months on his broken keyboard. For the first time, he heard it clearly, fully, as it was meant to sound. The difference was like night and day. He didn't realize how long he'd been playing until the door creaked open. Mira stood there, eyes wide, holding a basket of folded napkins. "Ravi," she whispered, "what are you doing?" He turned quickly. "I'm sorry, Ma." "I just wanted to hear it once." "I'll stop." But she didn't stop him. She smiled softly instead. "Go on," she said. "Play one more note." He looked at her in surprise. She nodded. So he played again. Not much, just a small tune, simple but full of love. When he finished, Mira wiped her eyes. "You sound like you were born for this," she said quietly. He smiled shyly. "Maybe one day I'll really play." That day came sooner than either of them expected. A few weeks later, Daniel's piano teacher had to cancel her visit due to illness. Daniel tried practicing on his own, but without guidance, he grew frustrated. One afternoon, his anger got the better of him, and he slammed the keys so hard that one of them broke. The sound echoed sharply through the hall. He cursed under his breath, stood up, and left the room angrily. Ravi, who had been cleaning the corridor, peeked inside. The piano stood there, silent and slightly damaged. He felt a pang in his chest. Instruments, he believed, were alive in their own way. They deserved care, not anger. After everyone left, he quietly stepped in and examined the broken key. It wasn't badly damaged, just slightly loose. With gentle fingers, he fixed it back in place. Then softly, he pressed it to test. It worked. And without thinking, he began to play again. Just a small tune, the same one he'd practiced under the stars for months. He didn't know that Daniel had returned to get his sheet music. From the doorway, Daniel froze, hearing the melody. His eyes widened. The notes were perfect, smooth, alive. For the first time, Daniel didn't laugh. He just listened, his pride melting into quiet astonishment. When Ravi stopped and turned around, he saw Daniel standing there. His heart nearly stopped. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just—" Daniel raised a hand. "Where did you learn that?" Ravi swallowed hard. "I listened," he said softly. Daniel said nothing for a moment. Then he simply nodded once and walked away. That night, Ravi didn't sleep. Not because he was scared, but because he finally knew something had changed. For the first time, someone from that house had looked at him differently. Not as the maid's son, not as a servant, but as someone who could play, and though no one said it aloud, a new chapter had quietly begun. The morning after that strange meeting with Daniel, Ravi woke up before sunrise. The sky was still gray and the air was cool and quiet. His mother was sleeping, but Ravi couldn't close his eyes. His mind was full of music, not just sounds, but that one question Daniel had asked. Where did you learn that? It was the first time anyone from that house had spoken to him about his playing without laughter. That single question echoed in his ears all morning. He went to his work as usual, helping Mira clean the rooms and dust the furniture. But every time he passed the music hall, his eyes went to the piano. It looked different now. Not like a distant dream, but something closer, something he could almost reach. For the next few days, Daniel didn't say anything. He practiced quietly whenever the teacher came, and Ravi stayed out of sight, though he still listened from behind the curtain. He noticed Daniel was working on a difficult piece, one full of fast notes and emotional highs. It sounded beautiful but heavy, like a storm inside the piano. Ravi couldn't stop himself from trying to copy it on his old keyboard at night. Of course, his version didn't sound the same. The keys stuck, the notes faded too quickly, but he followed the rhythm and learned the pattern. Bit by bit, the song started to take shape under his fingers. One evening, while cleaning the corridor, he heard Daniel talking to his father. "Father, the piece is too long," Daniel said, sounding frustrated. "I can't get the timing right. It's impossible without the full sheet." His father's deep voice replied, "Then work harder. The concert is in a month. You must be ready. I've invited important people. Don't disappoint me." There was silence for a moment. Then Daniel said softly, "Yes, Father." Ravi could feel the pressure in those words. He didn't envy Daniel anymore. He just understood that everyone, no matter how rich, carried their own weight. That night, when Daniel left for the city with his parents for a few days, the mansion grew quieter. No guests, no piano, no laughter. Mira used the time to rest a little, and Ravi took the chance to practice freely. He didn't dare go near the grand piano, but he played longer hours on his broken keyboard, sometimes until his fingers went numb. On the third night, he heard something that stopped him. It came from the mansion's main hall, faint footsteps, then a soft humming. He froze, listening. The sound came closer, and then he saw through the window. It was Mrs. Fernandez, Daniel's mother. She was walking slowly through the hall, humming a tune. Ravi realized it was the same melody Daniel had been struggling with. It was a song she used to hum to him when he was small, a lullaby. Maybe that's why Daniel had chosen it for his performance. Without thinking, Ravi pressed the same notes softly on his keyboard, matching her tune from far away. The sound blended faintly with her humming, though she couldn't hear him. It felt almost like they were playing together, her voice and his keys. When she left the hall, he stopped playing, smiling to himself. The next morning, while serving tea, he overheard her telling Mira, "It's strange, but last night I dreamed Daniel was playing beautifully. I could hear it so clearly. It was almost real." Mira smiled quietly. She didn't say a word, but she looked at Ravi with eyes full of pride. A few days later, Daniel returned. He was quieter than usual, more focused. His teacher had increased the intensity of his lessons, and the pressure was showing. Sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, he rubbed his temples and sighed deeply. Ravi wished he could help, but what could he do? He was just the maid's son. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. Daniel was practicing the same difficult piece when he suddenly stopped. He stared at the piano in frustration and muttered, "It just doesn't sound right." He stood up and paced the room. Ravi, who had been dusting the corridor, froze as Daniel's footsteps came closer. "You there," Daniel said. "You listen to me play sometimes, don't you?" Ravi hesitated. I just like the music, sir." "I don't mean to disturb," Daniel sighed. "Come in." Ravi's heart started racing. He stepped inside slowly, holding the duster like a shield. "Sit," Daniel said, pointing toward the bench next to the piano. Ravi sat, unsure what to expect. "Tell me something," Daniel said, leaning against the piano. "When I play this part," he pressed a few keys. "Does it sound wrong to you?" Ravi listened carefully. The notes were correct, but something felt off. "It's not wrong," he said quietly, "but maybe it sounds a little rushed. Like the notes are chasing each other instead of walking together." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Chasing each other?" Ravi nodded. "Yes. If you slow it just a little, maybe the melody will breathe more." Daniel stared at him for a second, then sat down again. He tried playing slower this time. The melody flowed differently, softer, smoother. It sounded right. He looked up in surprise. "You were correct." Ravi blinked, unsure if he had heard that right. Daniel gave a small, reluctant smile. "You have a good ear. Where did you learn that?" I just listened, Ravi said. Mostly from outside the window. Daniel didn't laugh this time. Well, he said after a moment, since you already listen, you might as well make it useful. If you hear something wrong when I practice, tell me. Ravi's mouth fell open slightly. Me, but I don't care, Daniel interrupted. Just tell me the truth when you hear it. And that's how it started. Every afternoon when the teacher wasn't around, Daniel practiced while Ravi quietly worked nearby, pretending to dust or arrange books. Once in a while, Daniel would glance his way and ask, "How does it sound?" And Ravi would give his honest opinion. Sometimes Daniel agreed. Sometimes he didn't, but gradually, they both began to enjoy those quiet exchanges. Music had built a bridge between two worlds that had always been far apart. Mira noticed the change in her son, the way he carried himself, the quiet light in his eyes. He was still humble, still gentle, but there was confidence now. One evening, Daniel's father returned early from the city with guests. They were wealthy people, businessmen, teachers, and local leaders. Dinner was served in the grand hall, and afterward, as usual, Daniel was asked to perform. But right before he started, he looked uneasy. "I can't find my new sheet," he whispered to his mother. "It's missing," she frowned. "You must have misplaced it. Play something else." Daniel nodded stiffly and began another piece, but halfway through he stopped. "I can't focus," he muttered. The room went quiet. The guests shifted uncomfortably. From the corner, Ravi stood watching, heart heavy. He had seen Daniel practice that piece for weeks. He knew how much it mattered to him. And he also knew that if Daniel couldn't play tonight, his father would be furious. Then something inside Ravi urged him forward. Before he could stop himself, he said softly, "I know the song." Everyone turned toward him. Daniel looked stunned. His father frowned. "What did you say?" Ravi swallowed. "I know the piece, sir. I've been listening. I remember it." The guests exchanged curious glances. Daniel blinked, speechless. "You?" his father said, half laughing. "You think you can play that piece?" Ravi hesitated. "Yes, sir. I can try." A few people chuckled. Someone whispered, "This should be interesting." Daniel stood up slowly. His expression wasn't mocking, though. It was mixed with curiosity. "Let him try," he said softly. His father looked at him surprised but finally shrugged. "Fine, let the maid's son play." The laughter grew louder, echoing around the hall. Ravi's hands trembled, but he walked toward the piano anyway. He sat down carefully, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The memory of their laughter from months ago flashed through his mind. But then he remembered his mother's words. "Let love drive you, not anger." He closed his eyes, took a slow breath, and began to play. The first notes were quiet, uncertain, but then something changed. His fingers found their rhythm. The melody unfolded, gentle, deep, full of emotion. The same piece Daniel had struggled with came alive under his touch, flowing effortlessly. The room fell silent. No one laughed anymore. The notes filled the air, soft and strong at once, telling a story no one could ignore. Even Daniel, standing at the side, looked at him with wide eyes. When Ravi finished, his hands rested on the keys for a moment before he looked up. The guests were frozen. Then one of them began to clap. Slowly, others joined in. The sound of applause grew louder and louder. Daniel's father stared at him, speechless. Finally, he said, "Where did you learn that?" Ravi smiled faintly. "I listened," he said simply. Mira, standing at the doorway, wiped her tears quietly with the edge of her sari. Daniel walked up to Ravi and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You played beautifully," he said softly. Ravi looked up, surprised. "Thank you, sir." Daniel shook his head. "Don't call me sir. Tonight you played better than I ever did." The guests continued to clap. And for the first time, Ravi felt seen, not as a servant, not as a maid's son, but as someone who belonged in the same room as the piano, the music, and the people who once laughed at him. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Ravi went back to his old keyboard. It still made dull, broken sounds, but he smiled as he played. Because now, when he closed his eyes, he could hear not just the music, but the applause, the kindness, and the quiet respect he had earned. He had crossed the line that once separated him from his dream. He had made his first real step forward, not just toward music, but toward a new life. That night, after the applause faded and everyone went home, Ravi sat alone outside the servants' quarters, his mind replaying everything that had just happened. The sound of clapping still echoed in his ears. He had never imagined such a thing could happen to him. The same people who once laughed now clapped for him. The moon hung high in the sky, and the breeze carried the faint smell of jasmine from the garden. He looked up, smiling softly. For the first time, the stars didn't seem so far away. When Mira came out and saw him sitting there, she placed her hand gently on his head. "You did it, my son," she whispered, her voice full of pride. Ravi looked at her. "Ma, they clapped for me." "I didn't think I'd ever hear that sound," she smiled. "You didn't play to impress them. You played because you love it. That's why it reached their hearts." Ravi nodded slowly. He didn't know what the future would bring, but at that moment he felt a kind of peace he'd never known. The next morning, the entire mansion buzzed with whispers. The maids, the cook, even the gardener had heard what happened the night before. Everyone looked at Ravi differently now, not with pity or distance, but with curiosity and a bit of respect. Daniel's father didn't say much that morning, but before leaving for work, he stopped near Ravi. "That was unexpected," he said in a low voice. "You play well." "Very well." Then, almost reluctantly, he added, "Keep practicing." It was a short sentence, but for Ravi it meant everything. Later that day, Daniel came to the servants' quarters while Ravi was cleaning the old keyboard. "You really surprised everyone," Daniel said with a small smile. Ravi looked up nervously. "I didn't mean to take your place or anything, sir." Daniel laughed lightly. "Take my place?" "No, you didn't take anything. You earned that moment." He paused for a second. "Listen, I've been thinking. You've been helping me for months without even realizing it. You hear things most people miss. Maybe you could help me prepare for my concert next month." Ravi blinked. "You want me to help you?" Daniel nodded. "Yes. You'll tell me what sounds right or wrong. Think of it as teamwork." Ravi didn't know what to say. The boy who once laughed at him was now asking for his help. That evening, they started their practice together. At first, it felt awkward. Daniel sat at the piano while Ravi stood nearby, hesitant to speak. But soon the music broke the silence between them. Daniel played. Ravi listened. When something sounded off, Ravi would quietly say, "Maybe a little slower here," or, "The soft part should feel gentler." Daniel followed his suggestions, surprised by how much it helped. Gradually, their practice turned into friendship. They laughed, shared small stories, and even teased each other. Sometimes, when Daniel got something right, Ravi clapped for him the way others once clapped for Ravi. For the first time in his life, Ravi felt he truly belonged, not as a servant, but as someone who mattered. But change often stirs both light and shadow. A few days later, Daniel's father came home with an important guest, a famous music professor from the city who was also a judge at the upcoming concert. They planned to discuss Daniel's performance. During dinner, the professor mentioned how rare real talent was. "True musicians," the man said, "are not born from comfort. They are born from hunger or from struggle." Daniel's father laughed. "Then my son will never lack struggle, I assure you. I've made him work hard for this concert." At that, Daniel looked down at his plate, saying nothing. The professor noticed. "Discipline is important," he said kindly, "but so is the heart. A musician must feel his music." Later that evening, while Ravi was wiping the piano, he heard the professor ask Daniel's father, "Who played the second piece last night?" "I heard people talking about it." "Oh, that?" the father said, chuckling. "A servant boy, the maid's son. He just copied what Daniel practiced." The professor raised his eyebrows. "Copied? You make it sound simple. If the boy truly played well, then perhaps he has a gift." The father shrugged. "Gift or not, he's a worker here. Let's not mix things up." Ravi pretended not to hear, but the words stung. Still, he kept cleaning quietly. He had learned by now that some walls take longer to break than others. The next day, Daniel told Ravi that his father didn't want him hanging around the music room anymore. "He thinks it's a distraction," Daniel said apologetically. Ravi smiled sadly. "It's all right. You have to focus on your concert." "You'll do great," Daniel frowned. "You really think I can do this?" "Yes," Ravi said simply. "You just need to feel the music. Not think about it too much." Daniel looked at him for a long moment and then nodded. "Promise me one thing, come to my concert. No matter what happens, I want you there." Ravi smiled. "I promise." For the next 2 weeks, Ravi practiced alone again on his broken keyboard. But something had changed inside him. His hands moved with more confidence, his playing more emotion. Every note he played now carried not just a sound, but a story. His story. Mira watched him silently, knowing he was no longer just chasing a dream. He was living it. One evening, when the mansion was empty, Daniel's mother came to the servants' quarters. She carried a small box in her hands. "Ravi," she said gently, "I heard you're not allowed to use the piano anymore, but I think someone like you shouldn't stop learning." She opened the box. Inside was a small used keyboard, far better than his old one. "It's not much," she said, "but it should help." Ravi looked at her, stunned. "Madam, I can't take this." "Yes, you can," she said firmly. "Music belongs to those who love it, not just those who can afford it." He held the keyboard carefully, almost as if afraid it would disappear. "Thank you," he whispered. "I'll never forget this." That night he played on the new keyboard for hours. The sound was clearer, fuller. His mother listened from her cot, tears in her eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her son's dream wasn't impossible. The day of the concert finally arrived. The town's main auditorium was full of people. Daniel was dressed in a crisp white suit, looking nervous but determined. His parents sat in the front row, surrounded by guests and judges, and in the very back corner of the hall, almost hidden from view, sat Ravi and Mira. They had come quietly, sitting among the crowd, their hearts pounding with excitement. When Daniel walked onto the stage, a hush fell over the room. He sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. At first, his hands trembled slightly, but soon he remembered Ravi's words. "Feel the music, don't just think about it." He let go of fear and allowed his heart to guide him. The melody filled the hall, rich and powerful. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. By the time he finished, the audience erupted in applause. Daniel smiled faintly and glanced toward the crowd. For a second, his eyes met Ravi's. He nodded once, as if saying thank you. When the concert ended, the judges praised Daniel's performance. One of them even said, "You played with feeling. That's what makes a true musician." Later, as everyone gathered outside the hall, Daniel's father was congratulating his son when he noticed Ravi standing nearby. For a moment he looked at the boy, the same Maid's son he had once dismissed, and then said quietly, "You helped him, didn't you?" Ravi hesitated. "Just a little, sir." The father nodded slowly. "Well, I suppose talent can come from anywhere." It wasn't much, but it was the first real acknowledgement he'd ever given. That night, back at the mansion, Daniel found Ravi sitting in the courtyard. He walked over and placed a folded envelope on the table. "What's this?" Ravi asked. "Something my mother and I talked about," Daniel said. "Inside is the address of a small music school. They teach students who can't afford lessons. The teacher there owes my mother a favor. If you go, he'll take you in." Ravi stared at him, speechless. "You mean I can actually learn?" Daniel smiled. "You already have the heart for it. Now it's time to get the training." Ravi's throat tightened. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Daniel said. "You reminded me why I started playing in the first place." They sat there in silence for a while, listening to the faint sound of crickets in the garden. For both of them, life had changed in ways they never imagined. That night, before sleeping, Ravi placed the small keyboard beside his bed. He ran his fingers over the keys gently, whispering to himself, "One day I'll make music that reaches even farther." And in his heart, he knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much bigger journey, one born from laughter, struggle, kindness, and the unshakable belief that dreams can grow anywhere, even in the smallest of places. The morning sun rose over Elmswood, spilling soft light through the cracked windows of the servants' quarters. Ravi sat beside his small keyboard, staring at the letter Daniel had given him the night before. The paper was worn from being held too many times, and the address was written in neat handwriting, the name of a small music school in the next town. His heart beat fast. This was a chance, the kind he had never imagined would come his way. Yet behind the excitement, a quiet fear lingered. Could he really leave? Could he walk away from everything he knew? The mansion, his mother, the only home he'd ever had? Mira watched him from the doorway. She knew what was running through his mind before he even spoke. "You're thinking of how hard it will be to go," she said softly. Ravi nodded. You've worked here all your life. I can't leave you alone, Ma. She smiled gently. You're not leaving me, my son. You're moving toward what you were born to do. Every mother dreams her child will go further than she ever could. You'll take my hopes with you. He looked at her, eyes wet. What if I fail? Then you'll learn, she said, brushing his hair back. But if you don't try, you'll never know how far you could have gone. Her words settled deep inside him. That afternoon he packed a small bag, just a few clothes, some coins, and his keyboard. Daniel came to see him off. You'll be great there, Daniel said, handing him a small notebook. Write your music in this. Someday you'll need it. Ravi took it, smiling. Thank you for everything. Daniel laughed lightly. No, thank you. You changed how I see music. And people. The journey to the next town took almost half a day. Ravi walked along dusty roads with his bag slung across his shoulder and the keyboard tucked under his arm. When he finally reached the music school, his heart pounded with both exhaustion and hope. The school wasn't fancy, just a modest old building with cracked walls and a sign that read, Harmony House of Music. Inside, he found an elderly man tuning a piano. The man looked up with curious eyes as Ravi entered. You must be the boy Mrs. Fernandez wrote about, he said. I'm Master Dev, so you want to learn music? Ravi nodded eagerly. Yes, sir. I'll work hard, I promise. Dev studied him for a moment. Can you play something? Ravi placed his small keyboard on a nearby table and started to play. His hands moved confidently, the melody soft but full of emotion. When he finished, the room fell silent. Dev finally smiled. You play with your heart, he said. That's something no one can teach. Welcome, Ravi. From that day, Ravi's real training began. The lessons were tough. Dev was a strict teacher, never cruel but never easy. Every note must tell a story, he often said. Don't play just to impress. Play to express. Ravi soaked up everything, theory, rhythm, technique, and composition. He practiced until late at night, often falling asleep beside his keyboard. Whenever he got tired, he remembered Mira's words. If you don't try, you'll never know how far you could have gone. Weeks turned into months, and Ravi's talent grew rapidly. The other students began to notice him. Some admired him, others envied him. But Ravi stayed humble, always remembering where he came from. One evening, Dev gathered all his students and said, Next month, there will be a local competition. It's a chance for young musicians to show their skill. I want you all to try, and especially you, Ravi. Ravi froze. Me, sir? Yes, you, Dev said firmly. You have a gift. It's time the world heard it. The thought of performing in front of strangers scared him, but he also felt a spark, the same one that had pushed him to play in the Fernandez mansion years ago. He accepted. For the next few weeks, he practiced harder than ever. He wrote a new piece, something entirely his own. It wasn't grand or complicated, but it told his story, of struggle, hope, and quiet victory. When the day of the competition arrived, Mira came from Elmswood to watch him. She had taken a day off from work, her hands still rough from cleaning, but her eyes bright with pride. Daniel and his family were there too, sitting in the front row. As Ravi walked onto the small stage, his heart raced. He looked at the piano, larger than any he'd ever played before, and then at the crowd. For a brief moment, he saw flashes of his past, the laughter, the long nights of secret practice, his mother's tired smile. He took a deep breath and began to play. The hall filled with music, soft at first, then deep and powerful. Each note carried emotion, flowing like a story being told without words. People stopped whispering. Even the judges leaned forward, listening closely. Ravi's fingers moved gracefully across the keys, his eyes closed, his heart open. The sound seemed to lift the air itself, touching something inside everyone who listened. When the final note faded, silence filled the room, a silence heavy with awe. Then came the applause. It started small, then grew louder until the entire hall echoed with clapping. Mira stood up, tears streaming down her face. Daniel smiled, clapping the loudest. Even Dev, who rarely showed emotion, nodded proudly. Ravi bowed his head, overwhelmed. He hadn't just played music. He had shared a piece of his soul. That night, the results were announced. Ravi won first place. The judges said his performance was pure, emotional, and unforgettable. When he walked off the stage, people came to congratulate him. A man from a nearby city's music academy approached him and said, We'd like to offer you a scholarship. You have real potential, young man. Ravi was speechless. He looked for his mother in the crowd, and when he found her, she was already crying and smiling at once. You did it, she said, hugging him tightly. No, Ma, he whispered. We did it. The next few years were filled with growth and change. Ravi studied at the academy, performed at local events, and even began teaching younger students who couldn't afford lessons, just like he once couldn't. He never forgot where he came from. Every time he sat at a piano, he remembered the broken keyboard, the laughter of those who doubted him, and the love that kept him going. One evening, after finishing a small concert, Ravi returned to Elmswood to visit the mansion. The place looked the same, though time had softened its shine. Mira had long retired, but she still came by sometimes to visit old friends. Daniel greeted him warmly. You've made a name for yourself now, he said proudly. Ravi smiled. I just followed the music. They walked to the old music room, the same one where it all began. Dust covered the piano, and sunlight streamed through the window in soft golden lines. Ravi sat down and gently pressed a key. The familiar sound filled the room, carrying memories of laughter, mockery, courage, and triumph. Do you remember that night? Daniel asked. The first time you played here? Ravi nodded, smiling. How could I forget? That was when everything changed. Daniel chuckled. And to think, everyone laughed when you said you wanted to play. I'm glad you didn't listen. Ravi looked at him, eyes shining. If they hadn't laughed, I might never have tried to prove them wrong. Daniel laughed softly. So their laughter was your first teacher? Maybe it was, Ravi said. He played a soft tune, the same one from the competition, but gentler now, filled with peace. Daniel closed his eyes, listening. For a moment, time stood still. When the music ended, the two sat quietly, knowing words weren't needed. As Ravi stood to leave, he looked around the room once more. The piano, the chairs, the sunlight on the floor, and realized something. He had not just become a pianist. He had become a symbol of what belief, hard work, and kindness could do. Later, as he walked home with his mother through the quiet streets, he said softly, Do you remember the night they laughed, Ma? Mira smiled. I do. But I also remember the night they clapped. Ravi laughed gently. Yes, both were important. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. His music would go farther than he ever imagined, reaching hearts of people who needed to believe that even the smallest dream, born in the humblest corner, could one day echo across the world.